Classical art forms are like vast oceans. A dip in its pristine waters, and you will be swimming in it till eternity. It's a work of a lifetime, and for some, many lifetimes. Have you ever watched a beautiful performance and wondered what must be going in to be able to perform at that level of excellence? Clearly, we all know the response is riyaz. Do you think the word riyaz can be confined to the word practice? To me, it has way more connotations and references. Don't you wish they told you what exactly they do when they say, "Hum riyaz karte hain"? Well, these are the questions that intrigued me, and I decided to get some answers. Not to keep them with me, but to share with the world at large the vision of these artists, their secrets. Hence the series
राज रियाज का।
Namaskar and welcome to Raz Riyaz Ka Season 3. In this episode, we have a very special and an extremely talented person from Amchi, Mumbai who straddles multiple disciplines with ease. A Kathak performer, teacher, choreographer, singer, composer, writer, director. I could go on and on. Her talent amazes me. She's someone who skillfully weaves music, dance and theatre in a cohesive single narrative. Sometimes I wish I could just enter her brain and see how it is wired and maybe borrow some creativity. And it is none other than my dear friend Sanjukta Wagh. Yay! Hi. So I was reading somewhere, Sayu, and in one of your introductions, which is on your website, I have to quote unquote. You say, "I was not one would call a natural dancer." I want to know why is that? Why do you say that?
Because I'm a made dancer, I'm not a natural. Dance didn't come naturally to me. I think I love tal, I enjoyed rhythms, but the whole idea of dance I picked up much later and after much effort, I would say. So there used to be dancers around me who used to pick up steps really quickly, and I used to be the slow one at the back wondering what's happening. But then I used to come home and practice because I loved my teacher, so I wanted to really impress her. So I used to work double hard, and then I used to know the movement inside out. So by the time we went to the next class, the others would have forgotten the movement because they got it as fast as they forgot it. But for me, it had kind of seeped in my body because I had really looked at it and practiced it and wondered about it and thought about it. So that's why I wasn't a natural dancer.
But it takes a lot of, I would say, strength to even say that, because I have always known you as one of the best dancers even in Didi's group. You've always been so good with everything, and for you to confidently say that as the first line in your introduction, I was like, wow, I have to pick on this line the moment I meet you.
It's the truth.
Okay, so let's come to this point of like what I've said in the introduction, multiple disciplines. You started training with Rajarshi Didi, Rajarshi Shirke. You went on to learning music with Pandit Murli Manohar Shukla ji. Then we have Guru G Venu. You went to Laban. You went, another thing maybe I'm forgetting.
Chetan Datar.
Chetan Datar, exactly. So all these multiple disciplines, firstly, how did you find the time? How did you go through it, and how have you brought it all together so beautifully in all your work?
I began really young, so it's like parents put their daughters into that twice a week class to keep them away out of their hair. So I happen to have, I think, one of the best teachers, Srimati Rajarshi Shirke. She was meticulous. She loved doing what she did. And she poured the art form into us bit by bit by bit, and not just the form, the whole context, the theory, the creativity. We were her senior students, so we were created on. So with her We traveled around the country, we got to learn production, we got to learn how to put a piece together. So that was dance. Singing, actually, I think I was such a natural singer that when my mum took me to Dinkar Kaikini to officially learn classical music, I zipped up. So
that's ironic.
Yeah, that's very ironic because I love singing and I think if I wasn't a dancer, I would definitely be a singer.
And you incorporate singing very specifically in most of your works. I've seen you sing in almost all the works that you have.
Because when I was a child, I used to sing all the time. I used to sing and sprint all the time. So now but I can't, you put me in front of a mic and ask me to sing, like keep my backbone straight and ask me to sing and I'll be terrible. But when I move and I sing, like when I sing in class with my students, it turns out beautifully well. So I'm actually right now researching the connection between movement and body and how movement can elicit a certain sound or a sound can change a movement and how you can sing and dance in your own body. Like I'm exploring the dancing singing body actually. That's one of my modes of inquiry. And then theatre happened. In school I was very interested in plays, and then of course we worked with Chetan Datar because Didi was collaborating with him on Ranga Nritya, and that was the entry into Marathi theatre where we were really trained in how to get the meaning of a text out and how to speak. And then of course Navarasa Sadhana with G. Venu, I'm sure many of your panelists have spoken about. It's just an entry into Abhinaya from a master. But what I really learned from G. Venu is how to be a teacher. I learned how to be an artist, but I also learned how to be a teacher. And the whole Navarasa Sadhana training is actually about developing your inner witness, which I think is key to any artist. Whether you're a dancer, you're a musician, an artist, an actor, you have to be your own compassionate, and I underline the word 3 times, compassionate, expansive witness. And that's what G. Venu is for all of us in Navarasa Sadhana, and he embodies that. So you just learn to be your own witness by observation, not even observation, osmosis almost. And there are 2 different things. There's one thing called the critical observer, which most dancers are. Like we self-flagellate all the time. Oh, this wasn't good, this wasn't good. Nitpicking for mistakes. We've all done it. But in this case, you're the vulnerable observer, where you're observing and letting it be. However you are in that moment is right.
No, so I want to cut you here and ask you, like all these aspects you've spoken about, how do you find intersection points? Like everyone learns dance, music, something, everyone has done the Navarasa Sadhana, but you're able to integrate all these. Is there a process for that? Is there a way, or it is organic and it just happens?
No, I think I was trained in literature. I did my BA and MA in English literature, and I worked with some amazing departments, the Department of Xavier's and the Department of SNDT, where I did my MA, in which literature and dance came together in a rather radical way when I was doing my MA. So we had a text to study on Entozake Shange, which was called For Colored Girls Who've Considered Suicide When the Rainbow Is Enough. That's the name of the choreo poem. She calls it the choreo poem.
Yes.
And she says, I give you the poem and you can work with it, and while you work on this poem, I have other work to do. That's what she says in the preface. And when I've never had this experience since, when I read that poem, one character called the Lady in Red jumped out at me, caught me by the collar and said, "Dance me now." So it was like a compelling thing. And this was an African American text which I placed in Banaras, and I danced her in Kathak to a Sarangi track. And it was the most, like, I'm a dancer because of that poem, because the character just opened up the concept of what a Naika can be, and here was a completely sensual Naika who knew herself and did not have to be slotted into those Ashtanaikas, you know. And from there came my Radha, from there came my Meera, from there came my Zanabai, from there came all of the Naikas.
So I want to ask at this point, so when did Entozake Shange happen to you? Is this your Kathak body that found her, or was it simultaneously? Because you've also said somewhere that the Kathak repertoire made you restless. And I think all these discoveries are happening because of a certain restlessness. So you want to tell us at what point this happened to you?
This happened in 2002 when I was doing my MA, rather early. That time I was dancing Kathak almost for 20 years because I started when I was 6. But the form of Entozake was Kathak. Though I directed the whole poem for the whole class then, because everybody says if she gets to dance the poem, why not? So we put up the whole poem, which was amazing. In there we used theatre and abstract movement and things like that.
This was at...
But this was at SNDT University. And the department was good enough, like Dr. Sunanda Pal, Dr. Mitra Parekh, amazing professors. I barged into their office and said, "I'm not going to write an assignment on this, I'm going to dance it."
What?
And they were just like, of course. And then my interpretation of the poem was my dance. So there's something in the classical arts called Padarth, which always bored me, you know. So if the word says Gagari and you show Gagari, okay, there's only so much that you can do. But if the word says Gagari, can you depict the potness of the Gagari? Can you depict what the Gagari means to you?
Maybe what it's made of.
Yeah, or whatever, like how the poem comes to you. And then this coming to potness of the pot, most recently I've done a teacher's training with Navtej Johar in yoga. I shouldn't call it yoga because he doesn't call it yoga. He calls it the BAPS method of asana, in which he speaks about, it's a very somatic, body-oriented approach to movement and approach to delving into different layers of the body. It's a beautiful approach, and he uses keywords and metaphors. So he uses, you know, this image of the potness of the pot comes from Navtej. So it's so many different, and Laban, like that was amazing because I went to London because I wanted to know the language my body wanted to speak in, because I was speaking in Kathak. And I think of dance as a language, a communicative language, a language of rhythm, a language of music.
And you call yourself a storyteller essentially, more than a dancer.
A storyteller, musician, dancer. Now thoda I think I'm sneaking in dancer. Let me pat myself a little bit on the back. I've done this for 30 years now. Yeah, so when I went to Laban, the major question was, what language does my body speak? Not the indoctrinated language that I've been speaking in for 20 years, because I found my choreography was becoming repetitive. I loved certain movements and certain motifs I did to perfection, and am I going to do that for the rest of my life? So I am someone who gets uncomfortable with comfort zones. Like when something becomes a habit, it becomes kind of stale. So I wanted to break that. And so that's exactly what happened. I broke my Kathak body, which was one of the most terrifying experiences of my life. I remember my first day standing in contemporary class and the teacher said, "Throw yourself on the floor." and everyone around me was like zoom, 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 and I'm standing there with my Kathak body saying it's too far. It was literally like throwing myself off a cliff. So I had to unlearn habits of Kathak to be able to jump into the contemporary world. So I think it took me 6 months to reach point 0, you know, where I could do my neutral body contemporary class. But it was the best thing that happened because my ego got blown to pieces. I'd gone on a scholarship, Charles Wallace scholarship, having choreographed 3 things and all. Then I was told, you don't know how to stand, you don't know how to walk, let's start with that. But I think this learning how to stand and learning how to walk needs to be a daily practice for everyone.
What I want to talk about at this point is the process, because you always talk about process and that is very important for you. It's not the final performance or what comes out, but I think the way you navigate through it. So how do you go about any new work as far as the process is concerned?
I think it starts with a buzz in the gut. Like something happens. Maybe I hear a song and that creates something. Like with Shah Hussain, for instance, it was Radhika singing Fakir Nemana, which is a production on the work of Shah Hussain. It was Radhika singing in a dark room in a village in Lunia Khedi, and she was singing Buriya, 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 and the meaning of Buriya is we are bad, bad, bad. The collective women's voice saying we are bad. And I said, I need to dance this. So that was the starting point of Shah Hussain. With something like Gandhari, I was handed the book and nothing came. Like I was uninspired, reading, rereading Yugant over and over. It was too prosaic for me. But then I had to literally, the character I had most questions for and I was most provoked by was Gandhari, because my question was, who would in their, mind, in their right mind, want to lose a sense organ? And so that's when I chose Gandhari, because I said I have most questions for this character in Mahabharata. And I didn't identify with her, I was provoked by her.
And particularly this journey is interesting because I feel like so many stories, I know the inside stories too, because this was a character which later on became one of your most acclaimed characters, for which you won the Meta Award as well for the best actress, right?
Yeah.
And how it evolved from you kind of not finding something to then creating something which is so spectacular and acclaimed.
No, the most terrifying part of Gandhari is as I delved into the character and as I became the character, I said, it's me. It's my story.
Really?
Because it is my story. I have so many blindfolds that I conveniently wear. We all have.
You say that in the...
Yeah.
You say that.
We all have our blindfolds, ones that we choose to wear conveniently as we please, closing our eyes on that which we don't wish to see. We all do that.
So I had a specific question about your choreographic work, but since we are on the topic, let's take Gandhari for instance, and can you help us go through the idea as to how you arrived at the point? It started with a book. I know you mention Geeta very often in context.
Yes.
And she's the one who gave you this thought. What did you do next to kind of unfold what happened?
So Geeta Chadha is a sociologist and she was doing Gandhari as a celebration of Iravati Karve, who was one of the first women anthropologists of India. And this is her non-academic texts. So she wrote a lot of non-academic writing along with her academic writing. So she handed me Yugandh and said, go, like, choose anything and dance it. You know, so I told you now why I chose Gandhari. But nothing came. But with over many cups of tea, we discovered, like, this was a woman. Most people say that Gandhari tied her blindfold because she was a pativrata. Her husband was blind, so she decided to tie the blindfold. But Karve says that it was an act of rage. And it was an act of rage turned inward, because there was no way in that whole patriarchal setup where she could hit out at the world. So she said, I don't want to look at the world who betrays me in this manner and doesn't even inform me that my husband to be is going to be blind. So that act of rage, and then how that churns and how she goes beyond the rage. I actually sat with a blindfold, and then the script started emerging in Gandhari's voice. I would say I really meditate on blindness. Like, I would sit in the dark and then things would come. And the script came out of my body more than my head. And then I was moving with it.
Now, I associate you so much with improvisation because that is something I believe you've even researching as a studio practice and a performance, and your very first performance is Bhitar Bahar, which is a product of that study. So tell us, what is improvisation and how does one do riyaz for improvisation, if at all there is one? So enlighten us about that.
I think to explain improvisation and there are many different kinds of improvisation. My inspiration for improvisation has been the rag. Because my question was, if a musician is immersed in his study or her study and she goes on stage and doesn't know what she's going to sing. She doesn't decide that I'm going to sing the sa 3 times and then go to re, ga, then give a gamak and then go to pa. She doesn't decide. She goes on stage and lets the rag evolve and tell its own story, and then when it truly evolves, it's a absolutely mesmerizing and a whole shift. The whole audience feels the shift with the performer who's discovering the rag in the process.
Like, it's happening then and
it's happening in the moment. So I said, why can't a dancer do that? Why does the dancer have to have steps choreographed to the T? That's one kind of dance.
Correct.
But if we have such a rich vocabulary in classical dance, why can't we use that to not be the dancer but to be the danced? And the poet that I think I'm having an affair with is Kabir. Because Kabir happened to me in 2003. Actually, even before that, I've been listening to Kumar Gandharva's Kabir. So then Kabir speaks about inhabiting the present moment. You know, and I was doing a piece on Kabir and I was freshly out of Laban. And I had already done in 2006 one whole production called Akat Katha, which was kind of choreographed. So the first, but still choreographed in a very different way, with the idea of the addresser, the singer being the addresser and the dancer being the addressee. So rather than me depicting the words, I'm responding to the singer. So there it had, yeah. So that was with Anand Thakur. That was my first deep dive into Kabir. And Kabir was on my mind when I was at Laban, because it was an especially excruciating time with everything getting redefined and reconfigured. So I always came back to identity. So when I came back, the Akat Katha structure did not feel right. I had to completely throw that away. I wanted to revive Akat Katha when the Kabir festival called me. But it just didn't feel right, and it was another singer altogether. So with Makarand Deshpande, we started from scratch. We started from point zero and we said, you sing, I'll dance. Whenever you go into rag, you break the rag and change the rag. Whenever I feel I want to dance Kathak, I break Kathak and go into some contemporary.
Wow.
So it was like, how does my body want to move? We don't want to go into form. And we did this for several months. So that time I was staying next to his house and we used to keep meeting. Daily we used to meet for a
This
session.
can't be like 2 rehearsals and go. No chance. Obviously.
I think 9 months would be it, literally
Like
like
the
birthing a baby. Yeah.
Exactly.
So then we used to meet every day and we used to have some great rehearsals and some terrible rehearsals. And then we called some people from outside to watch, like Neha Kutsarkar, who's a co-founder of Beast. It's like y'all are doing the same movements over and over and over again. And he's also singing the same kind of things. So then we changed the approach. He's like, let me go deep into the rag. And I said, let me dance Kathak. But the first part of the improvisation will be tal based. So we will be improvising with respect to tal. The second part of the improvisation, I used to take off my ghungroos on stage and do a complete movement improvisation. And the third part of the improvisation was Abhinaya. So that's how we kind of came up with the structure. And then there was a very interesting piece called Ye Tan Thaat Tambure Ka. So the idea of, there are only two possibilities of movement in space. You can either make a straight line or make a curved line. So we started working with the idea of a straight line and a curved line. And Makarand started really moving into a rag because he realized how a rag opens so many possibilities. So that's when we both realized that when there are restrictions, the improvisation flowers. But how do you restrict? So how do you fine tune your Chitta Bhumi for that improvisation to really flower and for you to really have moments where you discover the improvisation along with your audience, and those are just beautiful moments.
And at the same time, don't you feel they are also draining in energy? Because sometimes when you are set in a choreography, the muscle memory takes over. But here, at no point, the minute you are disconnect, gone. Some thread is lost.
Yeah.
So you're so invested and completely in tune.
We fell flat on our faces many times. In fact, in performance also. There are some performances in which I thought I was doing a great job. And like really in the improvisation, but the audience response was like, your Akat Katha production was better. And then there were some performances, like one where the performance was a technical disaster. Like my lighting designer didn't turn up till 10 minutes before the show. And I was livid. And I was just not at all warmed up, not at all ready. And so I just went on stage and I did something. And when I came backstage also, I was muttering. And then Rohini Hattangadi and Sulbha Deshpande come backstage and they have tears in their eyes and they said, oh gosh, that was so moving, that was so inspirational.
Isn't that insane? But this is so true to so many experiences of so many people.
Yeah.
Where you are feeling like, okay, but it's completely working, and then
yeah,
it's
because probably my anger must have transmuted into something that got interpreted as Kabir for them, So you never, I think you should never discount your audience, one. What they take away from your performance is the performance.
Correct. Wow, that's
and what you have to just keep trying and keep trying. You have to keep yourself ready. Now let's come to Riyaz, because we've not said a thing about Riyaz.
When one uses the word secret, one feels it's something that should not be shared. It should be guarded. But why should knowledge such as this be guarded and not shared? If shared, it will only result in making better and more dedicated artists, and that, in turn, will only benefit the art. We are fortunate to have such artists in the series Raaz Riyaz Ka, who are breaking the notion of their riyaz being a raaz.
राज रियाज का